Welcome back to the Senior Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Grant, and today we're diving into one of the most important, most life-changing health books of our time. We are talking about the book titled Being Mortal, Medicine, and What Matters in the End, written by Dr. Atul Gawande. This book has sold over 1 million copies. It's been translated into more than 30 languages. It's been read by families, doctors, caregivers, people in every corner of the world who face the hardest question of all: what really matters when time is short? And if you're over 60 or caring for someone who is, this might be the most important episode you ever hear. Because being mortal isn't about death. It's about dignity. It's about how modern medicine can save a life, but sometimes forgets how to protect what makes life worth living. This book has helped millions of people talk, really talk, about what they want in the final chapters of life, not in fear, not in silence, but with honesty, love, and clarity. So today, we're going to unpack its message, the truths it reveals, the stories that break your heart, and then show you how to heal. And if you are interested in reading it yourself, you will find a link in the top comment. This isn't just a podcast. It's a conversation every family needs to have. Let's begin. Being mortal begins with a simple truth. We've made incredible progress in medicine. We can treat disease, extend life, and delay death better than ever before. But somewhere along the way, we stopped asking a more human question. What do people actually want when they know their time is limited? Dr. Atul Gawande, a surgeon who spent his life inside hospitals, writes with honesty, humility, and something rare in modern medicine: emotional courage. He admits that doctors often don't know when to stop, that we sometimes keep treating because it feels like doing something, even when we know it may not help. He writes not just as a doctor, but as a son. His father, also a physician, was diagnosed with a tumor in his spine. And suddenly, all the clinical tools Atul had weren't enough. He had to face what every family eventually faces. Not just how long someone can live, but how well. And that's the heart of this book. It asks, what matters more, adding days to life or adding life to the days we have? Is it more important to survive longer, or to be able to say goodbye in your own home, surrounded by the people you love? Is it better to endure one more surgery, or to spend your final weeks walking in your garden, laughing with your grandchildren, watching the sun rise from your favorite chair? These aren't medical questions. They're human ones. And this book doesn't offer easy answers, but it does something more powerful. It gives you the language to talk about it, the strength to ask your doctor different questions, the clarity to choose dignity, comfort, and control over blind intervention. Because the truth is, most people don't fear dying. They fear not being heard, not being seen, not being allowed to decide how their story ends. Being mortal gives us a new framework, not just for aging, but for living, for prioritizing purpose over procedure, for making space for joy, even in decline, for choosing the kind of care that honors life right until the last breath. That's what this book is about. That's why it matters. Because once you see what really matters to people at the end of life, the simple things like being at home, eating what they like, talking with family, you start to realize how often those things are forgotten. Not intentionally, not cruelly, but quietly, as the machine of modern medicine takes over. It starts slowly: a diagnosis, a treatment plan, a scan, a follow-up. One appointment turns into 5. One medication turns into 10. And before anyone realizes it, the actual person at the center of it all, starts to disappear, replaced by a schedule, a chart, a plan. And that's where the story gets difficult. Because the truth is, most of our medical system isn't built for aging. It's built for emergencies, for action, for fixing. It's built to keep the heart pumping, the lungs breathing, the numbers stable. But aging doesn't follow that kind of plan. Aging isn't a single event. It's a quiet decline, 100 tiny losses, a slow reshaping of a life. Hospitals are amazing at fixing things. They save lives every single day. But aging? Dying? These aren't things to fix. They're experiences to guide, chapters to witness. And right now, we're failing at that. Because when medicine meets aging, its instinct is to intervene, to offer more, to keep trying, even when trying means tubes, machines, days in fluorescent rooms, months without a familiar voice, a body still breathing, but a life already gone. People get caught in a cycle of more scans, more surgeries, more aggressive therapies, and each one comes with hope, but also a cost. More time in hospitals, more side effects, more dependence, less of the life they were trying to hold on to in the first place. Atul Gawande talks about this as a doctor who stood on both sides of that line. He's offered treatments that prolonged life, but he's also watched those treatments drain the color out of someone's final weeks. He's seen the moment when the fight to survive becomes the reason someone stops living. He tells the story of patients passed between specialists, a cardiologist, a nephrologist, an oncologist, each focused on one system, one task, one decision, and no one asking the question that matters most. What is this person still hoping for? Sometimes that question comes too late, after the code blue, after the ICU transfer, after the feeding tube has been inserted, after a decision made in panic becomes permanent, and the chance for dignity, for choice, for goodbye is gone. We don't mean to cause harm, but in our urgency to do something, we often forget that sometimes being present is the most powerful thing we can do. Sometimes the most loving thing is not one more round of chemo, but sitting quietly with someone while they hold your hand and say, "I'm tired." This isn't just about hospitals. It's also about long-term care, nursing homes, assisted living, memory wards, all designed with good intentions, but often with the wrong blueprint. Because when safety becomes the only goal, we lose what it means to live. Locked medication carts, set menus, bathroom schedules, bright lights, gray walls, rules for everything. And in trying to avoid risk, we erase joy, spontaneity, identity. There's a story in the book about a facility that brought in animals, birds, cats, dogs, dozens of them. To many, it sounded like chaos, like danger. But what happened next was astonishing. Residents who hadn't spoken in weeks started to talk. People began laughing, caring, coming alive. Because life responds to life. And when we surround people with silence, predictability, and fear, we shouldn't be surprised when they shrink into that. And so we come to a hard but essential question. What are we doing with the time we have left? Are we protecting people from death or from living poorly? Because when we don't ask, when we don't plan, we hand over that time to the system. And the system will always choose more medications, more checklists, more procedures, even if they cost a person their final chapter. But when we do ask, when we take the time to listen, what people say is often so simple, so human. They want to stay at home. They want to sleep in their own bed. They want to eat what they like, listen to music, laugh with their children, watch the birds outside the window, be touched, be remembered, be seen. They don't want to fight forever. They want to feel like themselves, even if it's for a shorter time. And this is where being mortal lands its deepest truth, that we already have the ability to make these things happen. We have the hospice teams, the palliative care specialists, the tools, the training, the knowledge. What we're missing is the willingness to shift, the courage to say, let's stop trying to win, and let's start asking what would make this time meaningful. The wisdom to stop chasing what's possible and focus instead on what's precious. From what else can we try, to what are you hoping for, from let's fight this to let's make this beautiful. That shift in language, in mindset, in heart, it changes everything. And once you make that shift, once you start asking different questions, something remarkable happens. People begin to speak, not about treatments, not about their charts, but about what actually matters to them. A woman might say, I want to be able to eat chocolate ice cream again. A man might say, I just want to walk outside and feel the sun on my face. A mother might say, I want to make it to my grandson's graduation, even if it's the last thing I do. These aren't medical goals, they're life goals, and yet they have more power to guide care than any scan, any test, any textbook. This is where being mortal teaches us the most, that the job of medicine isn't just to preserve life, it's to preserve the meaning of life, especially when time is short. Atul Gawande explains how hard that is, even for doctors, even for families, because we're conditioned to think in terms of options, plans, risks. We want to fix, we want to help, we want to hold on. But sometimes helping means letting go, not of the person, but of the illusion that doing more is always better. Sometimes the real work is listening, not correcting, not persuading, just listening to a person's fears, to their wishes, to the memories they hold closest, and the regrets they still carry. That's when the reset begins. Because when a person feels heard, truly heard, they stop being a patient. They become a person again, a father, a wife, a neighbor, a soul who still has something to say. And in that space, care changes. Hospice becomes not a surrender, but a sanctuary. Home becomes not a risk, but a return. Silence becomes not an absence of medicine, but a fullness of presence. It doesn't mean giving up. It means giving what matters. The truth is, we can't control how or when we die, but we can control how we're treated in those final days, and we can absolutely control how we treat others. We can make room for laughter, even in the hospital. We can prioritize comfort, even when cure is no longer on the table. We can talk about the end, so it doesn't have to arrive as a shock or a tragedy or a silence too loud to bear. And maybe most importantly, we can live now with those values, not just at the end. We can ask the hard questions sooner. We can start planning with parents and partners and friends while there's still time. We can make sure that no one has to spend their final moments in confusion, in fear, or in a room full of machines when what they really wanted was peace. Because death isn't the enemy. The real enemy is a life that ends in chaos when it could have ended with meaning. And this is where the book becomes something more than just a diagnosis of the problem. It becomes a portrait of possibility. Because for all the failures being mortal uncovers, all the missed chances, the rushed decisions, the suffering that didn't have to happen, it also offers something else. Stories of people who got it right, who found a way to face the end not with panic, but with peace, not with silence, but with conversation, not with more time at any cost, but with more meaning in whatever time remained. These stories aren't about miracles. They're about presence. Take the woman nearing the end of her life, frail, terminal, offered a laundry list of options she didn't want. Her family was overwhelmed, her doctors uncertain, until someone asked the right question. What does a good day look like to you? And her answer wasn't complicated. If I can sit on the couch, eat chocolate pudding, and watch football with my husband, that's enough for me. That became her care plan. Not another scan, not another procedure, but the freedom to be home, to eat what she loved, to feel her husband's hand on hers during the game. She didn't live for years, but in those last weeks, she lived fully. Another man, diagnosed with terminal cancer, was told he had two options: aggressive treatment with painful side effects, or hospice. He chose neither at first. He wanted time to think. And during that time, he began writing letters to his grandchildren. Every day, he wrote about his life, his mistakes, his favorite books, the way he met their grandmother. He also taught his youngest granddaughter to cook. Every week, they'd make a new recipe, even when his hands shook, even when his appetite faded. He called it their Sunday school. When he finally entered hospice, it was his choice. He knew what was coming, but he didn't feel cheated. He felt ready, because the time he had was spent doing something that mattered, passing something on. And then there's the most personal story in the book, Gawande's own father, a strong man, a neurosurgeon, a thinker who understood the body better than most. But when he was diagnosed with a slow-growing spinal tumor, everything changed. At first, Gawande approached it like any other case: options, statistics, risks, surgery. But then his father said something that stopped him. "I need to know what this is going to mean for my mind." Not his pain, not his prognosis, but his ability to be himself. His father made it clear. He could live with some disability. He could tolerate decline. But if he lost his ability to think, to speak, to engage, that would be too much. That would cross a line. And so they talked, often, openly, as father and son, as doctor and patient. And eventually, they agreed on a plan, one that balanced hope with honesty. His father chose to have surgery, but only with strict limits. He wrote down his wishes. He kept his independence as long as possible. And when the time came to stop treatment, he didn't hesitate, because he had already said what mattered, and his family had already heard him. He spent his final months at home in the room he loved, surrounded by books, photos, music, his wife, his children, not in a hospital bed, not in a rush of tubes and alarms, but in his own time, on his own terms. That story, that ending, is not just touching. It's a model, a blueprint for what's possible when we have the courage to speak honestly, to plan early, and to honor the human being, not just the diagnosis. These aren't sad stories. These are success stories, because they show what can happen when we change the conversation, when we stop chasing every last minute and start filling the minutes we have with meaning, when we shift from medical default to personal design, from fear to focus, from avoidance to acceptance, and above all, from silence to love. Because love is what drives this. The desire not just to help someone live longer, but to make sure they don't miss what really matters in the time they have left. That's what being mortal teaches us, not with lectures, but with lives. And those stories stay with you long after the book ends, because they don't just show what's possible. They show what's necessary. They show that we, as a society, have to rethink how we see aging, that we, as families, have to get braver about having the hard conversations early, and that we, as individuals, have to start asking ourselves, not just how long we want to live, but how we want to live. Because time is not the same as quality, and survival is not the same as dignity. What being mortal teaches, in every chapter, in every story, is that mortality isn't something to fear. It's something to prepare for, to face, to honor, to make space for. And when we do that, when we treat the end of life with the same intention and love that we give to the beginning, something shifts. We stop seeing death as a failure. We stop seeing aging as a problem. And we start seeing both as part of the human story, the final chapters, not the discarded ones. That doesn't mean it's easy. It's not. These are the hardest conversations we'll ever have. But if we avoid them, we lose control, we lose clarity. And sometimes, we lose the person before they're even gone. But if we face them, gently, honestly, and with open hearts, we gain something so much deeper. We gain the ability to give our loved ones the ending they would choose, if they could. We gain the peace of knowing we asked, we listened, and we showed up. and we gain a kind of strength that stays with us long after they've passed. That's what this book gave me, and it's what I hope this episode gives you. A starting point, a framework, a bit of courage, to have the conversation, to ask the question, to change the story for yourself and for the people you love. Because in the end, it's not about living forever. It's about living well, all the way to the end. Ladies and gentlemen, let this sink in. See you next time.